I'll give it a couple minutes here. Actually, what I'll do is I'll actually go out, and this is actually something that I wanted to talk to you guys about. I won't be doing this during the actual, when I get into things, but one thing I wanted to point out is iRacing actually has a really good driving line that, yeah, it might not be the super fast, like if you're looking for those last maybe 3 to 5 tenths, it might not be that great. But if you are looking for something just to like learn the track and keep you on the track and doing more laps, I think this is actually not such a bad way of doing things. I did a fairly competitive lap with it earlier. At the moment, I'll just sort of drive around it, like just kind of trying to hit the marks that it shows. And I wanted to just test it out earlier, and I came in and I actually was able to do a fairly competitive lap, and it actually did help with just like a bunch of stuff. Even with cold tires right now, I am able to sort of follow it fairly well, and cold tires are definitely something we'll talk about today. I'll go over what the goals are and some things that we'll discuss, but as you can see, if you just have the driving lineup, if you are following in the server, you might not be able to see me actually driving on the driving line. I'm not sure how that works. If you can go to your options, and then on the right side there's driving aids, and you can turn on driving line. I don't know if it shows up in the replay. It should. For those people that are in the server right now and not on the Discord stream, one thing that you can do is just make sure you're up to the right time as me by making sure you're watching live. It'll say underneath the play button if you're doing if you're watching a replay or if you're doing it live. So this is just a quick lap following the almost threw it off. Following the green line that is supplied by iRacing, and it's just not a bad way, especially just to turn some laps and get an idea of braking. Especially, it does a really good job of helping out with braking and just being a little bit more consistent with that, and it gives you an idea of like whereabouts the car should be. So that's my quick little bit about.
Don't mean to talk over anybody, but I don't get any audio.
Is anyone else?
Yeah, I have audio.
I can hear you. Are you in? Were you in Discord, or are you hoping to just watch me? Can you hear me? I don't know who that was. All right, so let's talk setup. I put up my setup that I'm going to be using today on the main channel. I get a lot of questions. I think a lot of people talk about this a lot. We can sort of switch between the metric and the non-metric, the freedom units. You can see I start with a pretty low low PSI. This is all about making the tires last for a whole race. I think it does a much better job of doing that. When the tires start a little higher in PSI, they do feel better right out of the box for sure. But I think when they go off, they become quite spiky. I'll use the word spiky, whereas they have like a bit more of a knife edge. So we'll talk about like maybe some advice on how to just deal with these cold temperatures in a little bit. But as you can see, yeah, it's pretty low. We'll go to the chassis. I think this is probably weird for a lot of people. The sort of zero clicks part where we've got zeros across the board. This was weird for me when I first started it, but I think this works really well with this car and track combination. Seems like the car likes to be in this, especially for jumping curbs. I think this seems like a pretty good way of doing it. I didn't make this setup, just so you guys know. This is a version of a VRS setup. I pay for VRS, and I got it from them. It's actually the Suzuka setup. This is their faster race setup, which I modified very slightly. Some things to keep an eye out for: it has a lot of toe, and then a lot of rear bar. So if you do have like a lot of rotation and you're finding it difficult to keep the back end in check, those two things are maybe some things to look at with changing. So maybe going to a little less toe in, or maybe changing the ARB, and just playing around with that kind of stuff. So let's go out on track. I'm gonna turn off the driving line. And all right, so let's get into some things. Learning VIR. VIR is a fairly
What do I
challenging.
have to do to get audio?
Is anyone else having issues not hearing me? I don't know how to help him.
No, you're good.
Okay.
I can't hear anybody.
Is
When
he
you-
in?
When you're driving, it's very difficult to hear you.
Okay, I can help that actually. Go to my sound, and I'll just turn, especially the engine.
Scott, make sure that your Discord audio settings are not like set to some other speakers or headphones or something else.
All right. See if that helps. Do you think that that'll be better for the sound, or is that still a little bit too loud? Hopefully.
Definitely sounds better to me.
Okay. I'll go back one more time. I can't remember. Put it all the way. Let's just see. I kind of turned down as much as possible.
Yep.
All right.
Set up.
I think that's going to be as good as I'm going to get. So I'll try to talk my way through this, and we'll just see how it goes. All right, so learning VIR. VIR, fairly difficult track just to keep the car on the pavement, I would say. One of the things that we're going to talk about is making sure that you're getting the car in to the apex off the throttle. So one of the worst parts of VIR is getting late on a bunch of these corners. There's so many of them linked together. That can really affect just how fast your lap is and how safe it is. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is the approach to practice. When we go out and do practice, what I see a lot of is just like going out and just trying to bang in fast laps. I've got my session optimal over on the left side of the screen right now, and I think that while that's helpful, when you're just trying to learn the track, turning everything off, turning all your black boxes off, probably a good idea for the first little while, just so that you can sort of just get around the track and not like over push looking for that fast time. That's really important. And then also going out on a race setup, so you have the 34 liters or whatever it is in the tank, and actually trying to just burn that fuel out. Going out with the intent of doing 20 odd laps, or 15 laps or something like that, which means that you might brake way early, you might lift off the throttle a little earlier, you might just make sure you're on the perfect line first, so that when we do start to add some speed, the speed comes with the line in the right place first and foremost, so that we're not chasing the car all across the track just trying to go fast. Now, that also helps when it comes to dealing with the tires, because the cold tires are incredibly challenging, even just like going down the straights. When these tires are cold, that's when we get the car moving around a lot, even just down the straight. And then also you just get the big slides that are really hard to deal with. Now, if you're on the stream, you'll see in the middle of my screen, I've got my my steering wheel and my pedals up here. some little things to talk about with the pedals. When we go into the next braking zone, I'll point it out, but one thing you'll notice is that I don't use a ton of braking force. I'll come into the next braking zone here at the oak tree, and I won't actually use a ton of braking force. You won't see that buried to the floor. I think that's a big important part of this car and many cars in iRacing, but this one seems to be very, very sensitive to the brakes and how you use them. And so let's talk about that. Coming down into the oak tree corner, just sort of squeezing on the brakes, letting the car come around. And that's a fairly big braking zone. As you can see, the brake pedal didn't go, I would say probably, to 60%, maybe less than that. And I still was able to come into that braking zone fairly well.
What is your ABS?
My ABS right now is set to 4. So again, coming into a braking zone fairly hard, and you can see I'm still gonna make it there, but I actually used 50% of the braking there. I think one of the things that makes this car difficult to drive is in a way over braking. If you come up to your braking zone and you just absolutely hammer the brakes, I don't think it's as efficient of a braking maneuver, so it upsets the car a lot and you just get into the ABS. You almost want to use the ABS as a lockup. You want to use the ABS as little as possible. So as you can see right here, I'm kind of coming down to that 60%, and then just driving the line through. And then let's go, sorry, I have my notes here. Oh yes, so one of the big parts of this, and of course any kind of racing, it's all about finding a good exit and how that exit affects the next corners. Now this is a great part of the track to sort of talk about this. This part right here is, if you can get on the throttle early here or early in this sector, you're going to hold the throttle pretty much until we get to that left turn before the oak tree bend. So before South Bend. That's turn 10 if you're looking at the track map that I shared earlier. So it's important to sort of back this up so that we have a nice long run of mainly full throttle, especially from right here. If I can get on the throttle from here all the way down to that South Bend or close to it with these S's, then I'm gaining a lot of speed, and it's much more important to have that exit than take a little bit of extra time in through the entry of a corner. So when you're learning a track or when you're trying to find time, trying to err on the side of that, I know it's cliche, but the slow in, fast out is so helpful, because it's all about getting the nose in and then trying to get early on the throttle and making sure your throttles are, your exits are better. As just like right there is a really good example where if I can get on the throttle earlier at the oak tree bend, we come all the way down here. Next, so finding the straights. This is another good part of this track to talk about finding the straights. So we're gonna come into the tight hairpin here. We'll come down this main part, and I'm gonna go up into 4th gear. I'm gonna get the car on the left side, start my braking 3rd gear, turn in, and as soon as the car catches the ground there, I'm gonna try to get on the throttle. Tires are still a little angry, so I had to fight it all the way down there. I was a little off my timing. Let's go for a faster lap, and let's talk about getting to the apex correctly and driving it through. So I'll start to drive a little bit faster in hopes of finding a good lap, staying out, rolling the car into the throttle. There's a little bit of a bump there in the middle. It always seems to unsettle the car. Come through here, I'm gonna look to the outside of the track and sort of aim to the outside where that barn is, and then try to pick up that inside apex, drive through. I brake in a straight line, turn in late, and that gets me set up to get onto the throttle, just like we talked about. So I'm squeezing on. As soon as I can get around that corner, I'm on throttle all the way down here. So now it's on throttle. So how far back I got on the throttle there dictates how fast I am all the way down to the South Bend. Because even though I might do a little bit of a lift here, it's still all about the speed I've carried into the South Bend here. South Bend being one of the most important corners that it's super easy to throw a car off there. And let's do another shot at the oak tree, getting the nose in and running up and over there. All right, so not such a bad run through there. Now, one of the another part I want to talk about is rotating the car before the apex of the corner. Coming up to this next corner is a really good example of it. We've got a decreasing radius corner, so when I come in here, I want to get the car rotated before the corner. So actually, I'm off the throttle, or I'm off the brake before the apex, and I've got all the rotation done. That's going to help me so I don't just right here, I'm just going to blow through, and I've got to wait, then get back on the throttle there. If I had rotated the car before turning right, I would have had a better run down through that, the hog pen there. You know, approach to practice we talked about a little bit. The first session we talked a little bit about. So off to the side, rolling through, and then staying on throttle, staying to the inside, Now I'm gonna look up for that barn on the outside. I'm gonna get the car straight, start braking in a straight line, roll the car through the apex. I'm gonna brake in a straight line. I'll wait to turn in. I can pick up some of the curb here. It doesn't seem to unsettle the car very much. I'm gentle on the throttle. And it's all about just trying to get full throttle as early as possible down the S's. Now, these S's, when the tires start to warm up, they just get faster and faster. And if you can find the right line, there we go. Now, as you can see, that's the last one, the last right-hander, I think is the most important part of the S's, as if you're late on there, you're going to be late for the South Bend, and the South being late on the South Bend, I'm sure if you've done any laps here, if you go off there, you just fly across the track and lose a ton of time, and also, you know, wreck the car because this car is terrible on the grass. All right, let's see. All right, coming down into here, trying to get the car turned in, stay on the right side. Smooth squeeze on the gas, up to fourth here. Now the tires are starting to feel good. I'm starting to be able to push just a little bit. So just those few laps that I took where we were just sort of talking and driving, they're not too dissimilar from the kind of lap that I would go out on when I'm warming the tires up. It's gonna take some time, but one of the important things to think about is how the tires come up to temperature and how you can deal with that. Now, what you have to do, I think, is you have to adjust to the grip level that you have, and it's better to err on the side of caution, especially on the entry to a corner. That's really where things usually go wrong. It's very rare that you make a mistake on the exit that is so bad that you couldn't gather it up. It's the entries to the corners that seems to be really where the mistakes are made and that follow you through the corners. So let's just say I came out of the last lap, I was able to come through the S's here with a lot of speed. I would lift off, carry the speed, run through the right side of that apex there. That puts me in a really good position to just let the car run through here. And as you can see, I'm not pushing the car too hard, but I'm going to be able to set a pretty fast lap here, even though I'm driving underneath my abilities, just to be able to get the lap out. Building the speed up is really important with those cold tires, because if you just go right in and just try to hammer out fast laps out of the gate, that's when incidents happen. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that, but
Especially with starting right.
exactly. And just I think so much of it is about that braking, and just like one of the things to watch when I'm doing this, if you're on the stream, is how I don't brake all that hard, and sometimes when I do brake, I sort of carry a little bit, just a tiny bit of brake across the corner. So instead of like a big trail brake, it's actually just a couple percent. So I'll come down into this. This is a really good corner for this. I'll brake just after the 4, stay on the outside of the corner, and I'll just trail a little bit of brake. That keeps the nose in, not use a whole bunch of steering, and then just drive through there. Again, just a little bit of a brake. I'll carry it all the way down, and it's just like that little bit of 5% can make such a difference in a full in a corner, because it keeps that nose in, keeps your speed in check, make sure that you're on the right line. Apex before anything. So when you're practicing this, finding those apexes that either I've talked about or you've got on the racing line, if you find that you're starting to miss them, it's so much of it is about just slowing down that entry a little bit, just so you can get onto that right line and not overdrive the car, because it's so easy to do around here.
Richard,
Yes.
I've noticed that your audio for tires, because of the way you're driving, is very subtle.
Yeah.
You know, I'm overdriving the car and hearing a lot of tire noise.
A lot of tire noise for sure.
When you drive, it's just minimal threat noise.
And I have the tires up quite a bit on my audio. I left the tire noise up, so that's sort of a maybe something to think about. Is just maybe one thing to watch is my steering angle through here. I don't do a ton of steering. I try to be very, very quiet with the steering wheel and wait for the car to turn in, rather than me trying to force it. Like, you can hear them a little bit here and there, but try to keep them pretty quiet. You're gonna get some there because I oversped that a little bit. But I think that's an indicator of that, especially where you're getting that is an important thing to keep in mind. Is if you're hearing the tires a lot. Let's see, I'll brake a little bit deep and we'll get that. See, and that braking there, and then we're getting a lot of tire, and then we're turning, and then we're getting on it. Now that could be another reason why I see a lot of people talking about the tires not lasting during a full stint. That if you're really hearing the tire a lot, that's sort of telling you that you're really taking a lot out of that tire. That's an indication that we're over speeding the tire and then getting too much pressure or too much heat. I have the PSI here, so if you guys are used to PSI, maybe it's a good thing to keep an eye on as I drive here through this stint here, where that PSI is at, so that if you are sort of going a little bit too far with that tire scrubbing, you might be able to see where your tires are at. For me, it's KPA or whatever, I want to try to keep it under that 140-ish, but that changes. For some reason at Okayama, if the tires went above 130, I thought that they suffered. So I think at VIR, 130 was a little bit, or under 140 for VIR is what I'm kind of looking for.
What are you adjusting and thinking about?
So it's just that beginning tire pressure. Actually what I'll do now is I'll go into the pits and I'll go do, so you kind of seen a couple quicker laps where I've got some decent tires. So let's go out and talk about cold tires, because I think that that's a big part of what a lot of people's issues with this car. So what I'm going to do is kind of take you through a lap where I'm trying to do a faster lap. Let's say we're at the start of the race, and how I would drive with those first couple laps. One of the things that I'll do is I'll intentionally lift a little earlier and roll into the corner a little bit more, where I'm not doing a huge brake, and I've got less time where I'm minimizing between gas and brake. So I'll actually let the car run into the corner a little bit more than I would normally. allowing it to try to find the set versus me trying to really throw the weight of the car around. That's when you get a lot of disturbance through the car. So through here, I'll lift really early. I'll be really smooth and just let the car move around on its own. Try not to fight it too much and just do everything by lifting early and trying not to commit too much to the brake or the throttle too much, as that's how you get into trouble. And just wait. You have to be very, very patient. Feel the front end of the car. What I'll do now is this is kind of the speed of which I'd want to start the race at, where I'm pushing hard but trying not to over push. And then as we go through a lap or 2 laps here, you're going to see how that evolves. So coming down into here, I'll start lifting a little earlier. I'll be smoother on the brakes. I'll wait a little bit more. Waiting. Smoother on the throttle. I'll give a little bit of a lift through some of these parts so I don't get a big oversteer. Through here, it's a lot of waiting until I come down and make good contact. The suspension loads up, and even then I'm getting a good oversteer moment. Now, we kind of talked about braking before the 4 line coming into turn 1. So I'll back that up just slightly, where I'll lift before the 4 and then come down into the brakes. And just make sure that I'm not over speeding. I'm not getting the big tire noises. I'm just trying to let the car run through itself. In the middle of the corner there, I lifted. As you can see, it's a lot more, it's just, I'm letting the car move itself a lot more than me forcing it around. And I think it's just not over driving. I mean, I think that's the main thing I hope you guys come away with, is that I'm trying not to force the car around a lot and letting the car do a lot of the work. So through here, nice lift, make sure the car is tracking where I want it, and as soon as it's tracking where I want, then I can get back on the throttle and I can try to find that time. But it's about, you know, not over driving that entry. Now, the tires are starting to come up a little bit. I'm starting to get a little bit more feedback through the wheel. So the last time we came down here, I started braking at the second to last marker. I'll go a little bit deeper than that, and you'll see I'll probably start using a little bit more brake pressure, drive a little bit deeper into the corner. So let's go through there. So a little later, I didn't really do that lift. I was able to take a little bit more entry speed, and then we didn't get that oversteer there. Now, still being pretty careful through the hog pen, because it is still such an important corner to get right onto the straight. So that's now, we're 2 laps out, so we should be expecting some decent tire pressures. My sector times are up, so I'm gonna come down into here. We braked at the 4 last time. I'm gonna roll into the brake at the 4 that time, so still getting a little bit of speed. I even maybe just a little bit slow at apex there, but it still allowed me to drive out well, and I maybe lost a 10th. You know, losing a 10th on the entry is not that big of a deal, because I could easily overspeed that entry and lose 3, 4, 5 tenths there really easily. Getting the car set up for this section, getting it turned in. Off the throttle early, tuck the nose in, and as soon as the nose tucks in, get on the throttle to extend that distance. Yeah, coming down the S's, see if we can almost got it this time. It's all about this corner. We're a little late there, that's okay, take it down. That's a really important apex. The more curbing you can take on the inside there, tell you the truth, it's almost better. Get your eyes up around the corner, start feeding in the throttle. All right.
Hey, Rich.
Hey.
What do you think the additional time we're going to need to get tires hot in a sunset session?
In a sunset session, that's a great point. That the temperature of the track and the conditions of the track play a big difference into how the car performs. And that's going to be just something that I don't think there's a hard number for a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is just going to have to be like, you're going to have to sort of feel it out. Like, and like right now, the grip is pretty high on this server. Like I'm doing like a noon time, but the temperature is pretty low, which means that I've got pretty decent grip, and I'm going to be able to throw in some decent lap times. But you know, if like we saw at Laguna Seca, we had a really high temperature for the qualifying, and the qualifying times were actually quite a bit slower than the race times for a lot of people, because the temperature was just completely different, and then that affected how you had to drive the track that day for both those sessions. So a lot of this is going to have to be this idea of building up the speed is super important, also because of the difference in the weather conditions, where you know the last time you went into a server, you might not have the same grip levels as the time you're in right now. Maybe you have more, maybe you have less. That's why if you're watching the stream, I have on the left side the session optimal, not all time, not versus best all time, because best all time tends to give you a distorted view, because you could have gone into a morning session, you could have just had amazing temperatures, and you're just pushing yourself against a time that is not even possible in that session that you're in. So I always like to go for the session optimal sector. That gives me an idea of just how I'm driving versus that sector that I did really, really well in this session. And that's usually how I like to compare myself when I do go into that sort of aspect of the data.
Thank you.
Yeah, buddy, absolutely. I have the Fanatec CSL Elite pedals. They're the first ones they came out with, so they have the load cell. Load cell is super important, but one thing that you'll notice when I am doing the braking, I'll come down into this braking point down here, is like I actually don't use a ton of pedal travel. So coming down into here, you know, that's kind of like my max pedal travel that you'll usually see, is that like 80-ish%. And I'll just do it like this is something that I've gotten into really big in iRacing lately. The brake pedal. Why I only use to about 80% there every time I come into a braking zone. One of the reasons, sort of in someone's way. One of the reason, or the reason why I do that, iRacing models a brake pedal full throw, and what I mean by that is the maximum brake pressure is not that you can give is actually like 3/4 of the way down the travel of the pedal. What I mean by that is the brakes will actually grab the brake pad will grab the disc just like it would in your car. So in your car, you could push your brake pedal all the way to the firewall, but you'll probably never get there because the brakes will stop you before that point. There's going to be so much pressure in the line. So iRacing doesn't model that like 100% braking is where the lockup will happen. It actually maps it as if it's a real pedal throw. So 80% might be the maximum braking pressure that you can actually apply before you start getting lockup or ABS. So that's why you'll see, like, I also think that that's why people have a lot of issues with the braking, because they come into a braking zone. I'll just do it up on the straightaway here. They'll come into a braking zone, and instead of like gradually getting into the pedal, it's everything. And as soon as you start using everything like that, that's when you're actually over braking the car. You're going right to that like lockup, or you're going right to the ABS, and that causes issues. Another issue with that is if you're using 100% of your braking, and then you try to turn the car, you're then asking the front tires to both brake at 100% and turn, and the cup is too full. Like it can't do, the tire can't do both those things. So if you're slightly under braking, or if you're you're trail braking, that trail braking has to be done with that in mind, that you can't use 100% of the brake pressure, and then also turn the car. Now, again, if you're using 100% of the brake pedal, and then you're sort of trying to do some trail braking and you're getting too much brake, that means because of how iRacing models the brake, it's like you might still be at like 80-90% of the braking capacity of the tire as you try to turn in, and you're like, well, like with the feeling what you might have is like, oh, this car understeers a lot and I can't get the car to turn in under trail braking, and it's more along the lines of the issue might be that the trail braking isn't being applied correctly because you have too much brake on at the time. I always like to say trail braking should be done at 10% of the pedal throw or less. So just that slight amount here and there, just to sort of drag in and keep the front end down, and then rolling back on the throttle. Another thing you'll see in my driving is and this might be different for a lot of people. I think Kevin might be a little different to me than on this. Kevin San Diego, he's either on the brake or the throttle. I do a lot of no pedal, so I'll let the car coast a little bit more. And with the tires, I think around a place like this, the tires will continue to improve until about lap 8 or so, somewhere around there. However, the fuel is coming off the whole time, so you're gonna actually be getting faster the whole time, mainly because the fuel is coming off. Now, when you go into the pits, for example, and fuel up, you're going to come out, and the tires are still going to be in a pretty roughshod manner. So you're going to have to keep in mind that you almost have to like take a step back, and that first lap has to be sort of reacquainting yourself with that, with the grip levels that it has at that time. And then if you've done a good job, trying to slow your hands down, similar to what I'm doing here, not overdoing those tires. Hopefully, at the end of the race, even if you're doing the A main, you should need to take tires, and you should be able to still push at the end when all the fuel is coming off the car. Yeah, that's an important aspect of these longer races, is not running those tires off and trying to feel the car. Yeah, let me just see. 6 to 8 and the fuel. All right, so I've been talking for a while now, so why don't we open things up to questions if anybody has anything, or if you guys want me to go over anything, or yeah, I'm open.
My main issue driving this car is I don't have a load cell brake
Yeah,
pedal.
absolutely.
Is there any suggestions for changing traction control or ABS settings? I'm using a Logitech 920 G920,
Right.
and so I'm having inconsistent braking all the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's a couple mods that you can do to your pedal to maybe help you out. However, before even getting into that, I would start playing around with. I'm just going to go into the settings really quickly. I would start playing. You might already know this, but just in case someone doesn't, you've got here your brake force factor. Because I have a load cell, mine is at 0. I would start playing around with yours and play around with it in this screen, so you can kind of adjust it to try to see if you can find a way that you can somewhat accurately get to this 80% ish braking performance where you think you'll be at. Now, I say that, but so when I set up my pedals, I make it so like that press there where I'm at there feels like a lot. It feels like I'm pressing really hard. Now, in reality, in what happens in game is as soon as I get behind someone, or as soon as I start pushing hard, I immediately start pushing the pedal harder than I do when I'm just setting up the pedals. So I'll always kind of back it down a little bit. So start playing with the brake force factor, so that you can kind of see how it works, where it, you can see how it changes the slider there. So maybe something to play with is to go into your settings and just try to play around with this brake force factor. As you can see, I could have that. It's just how the brake is applied and how that the force factor is increased. So something to maybe play with there.
Yeah, because I usually like I leave the pits or whatever, and like when we ran the Nürburgring 24, I'd get
Mhm.
like a lazy spin on the GP section on cold
Gotcha.
tires.
On cold
And
tires, yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah, yeah.
okay, that's
And
cool.
that's actually another thing I meant to talk about with regards to practice. When we go into the practice right before the race, I highly recommend doing 2-lap stints to start just before the race, because one thing that I'm guilty of, I did this a little while ago and I've changed it since, is I used to go out just before our races and just hammer in a bunch of laps. So I'd be on lap 8 to 10 in the practice session, and then we'd go out and start the race. Now the problem with that is you're so used to the grip levels at that lap 10, and then you go out and you're excited and we're going into the first laps with other people around, and you're kind of half expecting that same grip level, and then you get out there and you've got lap 2 old tire or first lap tires. So right before the start of the race, what I'll do is I'll just do 2-lap stints. I'll come in hopefully 10-15 minutes early. I'll maybe do a 5-lap stint, and then I'll come in and I'll just do 2 laps, 2 laps, 2 laps, 2 laps, just so I can get used to the feeling of having like the cold tire grip. And then that really helps me because like as the tires get better, I'm just gonna drive better the whole time. At that point I don't really need to practice the hot tires because I'm hopefully just gonna be driving well at that point anyways. But I'm really worried about how my first 2 laps are gonna go. So I'll just practice that over and over and over and over. You might only get two or three of them, but at least you'll have like a sense of how those cold tires react, and makes it a lot easier. Anyone else? Feel free, guys. I know I kind of spit a lot of stuff out there. I can put some of this down. But.
Since we're coming up to it, line selection for this this next left here.
Absolutely. I think you have a couple options. I like to use reference points as much as possible. When the tires are cold, this one to where is it? My right now, that 1 marker is not a bad place to start to like come off the throttle and start my braking. And then you have a choice here on how to enter this corner. I think the best way is to come across and tag this curb and run across this curb to sort of set you up for a good entry down here, and then focus on getting the card to here before getting on the throttle, because then you can see there's a good line there. I'll come back to it in a minute, but you can do another line where you kind of just dive straight at the apex. I just don't like it as much because I think there's less room for error, and I just mess it up more. When I dive right at the apex, and then what often happens is I just get understeer, and I'm just waiting on the front end trying to go down that hill, and then it just compounds itself there.
It's definitely South Bend, I think, at the top of the S's, where I don't have the line right. I'm just going way too fast, and I get on the brake, and I just go straight off.
Straight off, yeah, absolutely. Let me get there, and I'll talk about that, because that is probably one of the most difficult corners in this track, mainly because of the speed. The speed you hit it is just like, and for the accuracy that you need. And if you are having accuracy issues, it's kind of what I come back to a lot is the entry, and the entry starts quite early. The entry starts at that last corner of the S's up here. So I'll take the S's a little bit slower, but in the the sort of line that I want to take through here, which is running up this curb. I want to run up that curb so that it puts me into this position here, so that I can try to get the car to this apex and then on the throttle. Versus like what often happens is you start too far left on that last right-hander, and then you're in the middle, and then you kind of half blow the braking, and then you're just waiting on the front end or just flying across the grass, either one, you know. And it all comes down to the entry of the corner. So to try to back things up, so you're gonna have to like think at the next lap. I'm not gonna go so deep through the S's, and I'm gonna give up a little bit so that I can have a much better run through the South Bend, which is easier said than done. I do
Well,
realize.
this next one here, I don't know if it's a setup issue, but I get really loose right here.
Really loose. Oh, like the back end starts coming around, right?
Yeah, usually on the curb, like fighting oversteer.
Absolutely, yeah, I'm with you. I've definitely had that myself. It comes from, I think, just trying to get out of that hairpin as quickly as possible. And sometimes, like, I even just use a sound cue there. You can almost hear the swell of the engine coming, and it's like you're gonna hit VTEC, and it's while you're all loaded up and still turning to the left, and it's going downhill, and it's coming. The track is falling away slightly. And all those things are just like a recipe for a big oversteer moment or / into the grass there, which I've definitely done. Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to deal with. You have to start playing with the throttle. I think being smooth out of the hairpin at the top there, I think the roller coaster hairpin, they call it. I think that's kind of the solution to it, but that's easier said than done again, where you have to feel that out. And if you do commit to the throttle and you do hear that swell coming, that's when you're gonna have to and it doesn't have to be a big lift here. I'll give it a shot if I can see if I can sort of push through that area a little bit. What you kind of have to do is listen for if the engine's really starting to come alive as you're still turning left. You have to be cognizant of the fact that you're doing a little bit of turning there, and then to just peel off the throttle a little bit. So let's see if I can do it here. I'll try to get a good run through. So that's not a bad setup. So I've gotten that pretty good, and coming down here, and that's where that oversteer happens. And it's just, yeah, I mean, you can hear when it's coming, and you just I was fighting it all the way through there and through here. That happens a lot too, that big oversteer movement there. And just like peeling off the throttle a little bit really helps, but peeling off too much, might also send a bit of a slide. Anybody?
I'll pass it on to somebody else.
Sure.
Well, thanks for the information. That's definitely
No problem.
something to try.
I kind of did a huge brain dump there. I realized that that's just me like spitting as much as I can out. Hopefully some of it sticks.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Awesome,
man.
I'm absorbing all of it.
Good stuff. Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, more than happy.
Do you find yourself adjusting the brake bias during the race? And if so, like what indicators are you looking for, and what direction you choose to
Could
move?
you repeat the start of that?
Yeah. Do you find yourself adjusting brake bias during the race?
Brake bias. Actually, it's funny. I saw that Sem does a lot of. He says he does a lot. I actually don't. I've never really played with it. Maybe I should. The only time I ever do is if I get too much rear locking. But I also drive karts, so at the same time, like I deal with a lot of rear locking, and it's okay. But if I do feel like I'm getting a lot of rear locking, that's when I'll do that, like a quick little, you can see on the dash, I'll go up a couple clicks. I usually do in 2-click increments, I'll go up a couple, but that's usually the only time that I do it. During the race, I've actually never really got into it with this car. I don't know if I'm good enough to feel it.
I think it's more apparent if you're driving an Audi and the front tires are what's doing all the work. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe also a little bit my style too, where I try not to overdo the front end. I do my best to try to not overdrive the front end. And maybe that's part of why I tend to not have to do it. Maybe Sem during the race he actually goes rearward a little bit if he feels like he's overloading that front end. I don't know. I don't know what he decides to do. I know he mentioned it on the throttle the forum the other day, and I was like, oh, maybe I should try that.
So I turned it down until I stopped getting ABS intervention, but that's me.
Gotcha. Yeah, yeah. And I think we're always gonna get some ABS. You're always gonna like click on those lights, but having them turn on as little as possible definitely should be the goal there.
Couple percent though. I usually maybe 2% negative.
Yeah. So. Oh wow. I've never messed up. So about 2%. Gotcha. I usually just go in two click increments. So I guess that's a 1/4% or a 0.5% when I do it.
When the tire temperatures start coming up, it seems to do it less if you turn it down incrementally. Like the first lap, I usually leave it. Then 2 laps in, I do like 2 clicks, and then two more laps, 2 more clicks.
Oh, gotcha. Cool.
But I don't know if it's working or not. That's just what I've been doing, and it seems to be okay. Doesn't
Gotcha.
It makes the car better as far as I can tell, but
Right.
I've been doing that too.
Oh, cool.
End of the, say, laps 5 or 6, I'm usually back about 2% from where I start the race.
Wow. I guess I should probably test that out. I've
It's
always
probably,
just
like, I'm probably way over braking into every corner, so that's probably I've got to adjust it a lot more, right? Where
Right.
you seem so smooth on the brakes, like.
Yeah.
I a little bit late. I don't know if you talked at all about any general kind of setup tips for the Cayman. Like when I've been looking at setups on the internet, there seems to be a really big range. Like some people are going with a really high rake, like setting the back end as high as it can go.
Right.
And like for me, that's all over the place.
Yeah, it's got a lot of oversteer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm finding I have to have the rear end lower than the front, otherwise I'm flat, like I'm just oversteering everywhere.
Yeah, yeah. Which could maybe talk a little bit about like your hands on the way in, or maybe how you brake slightly. Those two things kind of go together a little bit with regards to how the car's set up. So with this car, I have been tending to go towards the VRS setups, which tend to have almost a completely flat car. Yeah, they have like no rake, and then they have like zeros across the board for the suspension. Like you got 0 click everywhere. So it's I'll go into the setup. I'll just finish up this lap. Yeah, I just wish so badly that the ABS and the traction control were separate instead of together, because I would really like to turn.
Oh god, yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to adjust them separately really badly, and I know that's a thing in the real car, so I really wish we could have that in the iRacing car. It's a 156.6, just to mess around. Yeah, I'll show you my setup screen and where I go for this. So we talked about it at the start, but I start with a really low PSI or KPA. That's just to make sure that I think the tires last a lot better throughout a race that way. And then when we get into the chassis, depending on what you use, I use quite a bit of toe. And then you can see the ride heights it's even higher in the front at the moment.
And that's kind of what I've settled on too, is about like a millimeter lower in the rear, and I think that I got that from a VRS setup too.
Yeah, and they run a lot of rear bar, and then a lot of toe to get that rotation. So the rotation is being done with the bar and the toe. which is interesting.
Richard, I have a question. When you speak about the bar, is it the A or B blades?
Yes, the ARB blades. Actually, I don't. It's different anti-roll bar position. Oh.
Or is it the wing setting?
ARB blade is that's the anti-roll bar. So
Okay,
the
so
wing
that,
setting is 5.
so that means if you want to have less oversteer,
I would
you
come down. Yeah,
you come down from 7. Now, so basically you go from 7 to 5, and you should have less oversteer.
To tell you the truth, if I was you guys and you find like if you were to put this exact setup that I have up right now, and you're like, oh man, the back end is really really twitchy, I would actually think about going for trying out changing the toe in to like a 1 click down if I have it on metric, maybe from that 6 64ths to -5 64ths. Just to adjust that and try that out. That's going to give you a little less front end. You're still going to have the back might actually track kind of well still, but not have that really big bite from that toe in at the front. And then you could always just play around with going back to. I really like these shock settings, especially for this track. The thing is though that like the camber is super high at the front and even at the rear, like -2.5 is a lot. So that's what gives that super edgy feel, especially on the cold tires, because the car is sitting on really small bands of cold tire on going down the straights and stuff. So that's why you get that like that uneasy feeling where the car sort of tracks all over the place.
If the car is really handling bad on the cold tires with the rear, would it help to increase the tire pressure just on the rear tires?
It does. I've done a little bit of testing with that where it does help, but it helps initially. What I mean by that is if you're doing a qualifying, that's not a bad idea. To bump up the rear tires. However, if you're doing like a longer race, like if you're doing like half an hour, 45 minutes, I think that one of the issues that you might have is that the like you can see here the temps on the inside might just get a little too high, and then I think it starts going the other way. It's detrimental for longer too, so maybe it's the last 10 15 20 minutes of the race your tires are a little bit overworn versus if you would have gone for a lower temperature at the start or a lower pressure at the start. Then you wouldn't have that at the end. So it's about preserving the tires for the longer race. I don't know how many people have noticed, but actually for the last couple races, my last lap has been my fastest, and that's like mainly because the fuel is out. But the fuel is out, but I also I still have that ability because of how low I start the race.
And then what I'm still trying to figure out are the gears. Like
yeah.
you know, it's like when you drive a lap, if you could go over the gears.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. I didn't think of that. So let's go over that. Turn 1 here. This is down to second gear.
Okay.
Rolling it through. It might feel like it's a little bit low and you're coming down, but the car has pretty low gearing. For me, this next one's third gear. I saw Kevin do it earlier in second. I'm not sure. You could play around with that. This is definitely second gear to me. I like to come up quickly into third as I transition the car. Hold on to third through here until we get down the straight. The S's, I believe, are 5th. We're gonna see when we get there. Yeah, they're 5th. And then we're gonna drop down to 4th for the south bend.
Okay.
To the inside curb. And then we'll keep 4th, down to 3rd, and then before turning in, down to 2nd, roll across. The next hairpin is going to be in second for sure. Yeah, you can just see how much the car moves around down the straights with the cold temperature. All right, so try to pick up that inside curb. Second gear, off the brakes, let it roll through. And then I know that oversteer is coming, so with a cold tire, I'll actually lift slightly through the middle there, just so I don't get that big oversteer. I'm not going to lose very much time, maybe a half tenth to a tenth or something like that if I roll off the throttle there. If I lost half tenth, I'd be pretty surprised, but it keeps me on the track, so I won't commit fully to that throttle just because I know that there's that possibility of getting that oversteer moment, and an oversteer moment in that section of the track is sketchy, to say the least.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you. That helped.
Absolutely. Anybody else?
Rich, one more question.
Absolutely.
Is there any sources to get parts and stuff in Canada right now?
There's one guy out in Ontario that is selling stuff for massively overpriced. I know that. I've been, I've got a bunch of friends that are wanting to get into this or trying to upgrade. Everyone's watching Craigslist and stuff like a hawk, and the prices, from what I understand, around the world have gone through the roof. I was watching something from a guy in Europe who said that, getting any kind of sim hardware right now is really difficult and really expensive. So, there's guys online selling whole setups for brand new prices for stuff that's been used. So it may be coming up here and there, and especially as we phase back in. Yeah, I don't know many places. There's a guy in Vancouver that I know, or in Richmond. Sorry, no, he's in Richmond. He sells some Fanatec stuff, but I know is pretty dry on stuff as all the supply chain has kind of collapsed on him there.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I figured. But
I have heard that some people got the new Thrustmaster load cell pedals through Staples. So if you can find a link for those pedals through Staples, if that's something you're interested in upgrading, the new Thrustmaster, I can't remember what they're called, but if you look up the Thrustmaster load cell, and some people are getting it through Staples. That's what my buddy just did. But
Wow.
yeah.
What do you think is better, the Fanatec or the Thrustmaster?
Ooh, I don't know. I haven't tried the Thrustmaster. My buddy just got them. He really likes them. They seem like they're really nice. I would guess that they're very comparable, and whatever you get, you'd probably be happy with. I definitely have my eye on the new CSL pedals from Fanatec. I would think about getting those myself. I have the CSL Elite from, I think it's like 8-9 years ago. So my pedals are a little long in the tooth, but they're great. So they're still working well. So, but if there is one upgrade that I would suggest to anybody getting into sim racing is a load cell pedal.
Yeah, because right now I'm running. I think you saw it before on the Discord. I'm running the Trustmaster T500 RS, and they don't
Right.
have a load cell.
Yeah.
I know there was an upgrade available, like to do the Rigmotech thing in it, but I heard that the Fanatec, the V3 pedals are pretty good, the load cell ones.
Yeah.
And,
they are. I had a set. I've had a set of V3s back in the day. Personally, for some, I can't tell you why. I don't know why this is. I prefer the CSL Elites, but that's just me, and I'm not right about everything. Just yeah.
Having done the research on this stuff too, I will say, for the money you're going to spend to get a mod kit, you're usually better off just fencing your old pedals and just buying an upgraded pedal set with load cells.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking. But I kind of like I have the the Trustmaster TSPC Racer wheel combination,
Oh, right.
and supposedly that's pretty good. So should I just keep the wheel and just change the pedals?
Yeah, I think that's a great set. That's basically what I have. I have the TSXW Racer, so very similar, and then I have the Fanatec load cell. And I think I unless you want to spend significantly more money, I think that that's pretty much the best setup that you can have.
Less money the better, you know. So
Agreed.
so it doesn't matter to combine Trustmaster and Fanatec with each other.
No, because the Fanatec comes with a USB for the pedals, so it goes directly into your computer, which is actually a better way of doing it, anyways, because you get more frequency that way as well. Sometimes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Before the era of direct drive wheels, the hearsay was like the world championship winners are running like G27 wheels, but we're still running load cell pedals. So take that for what it is. Always
Yeah.
pedal before wheels.
Yes. Yes. They even say it on the Fanatec package. You like open it up and it's like, if you want if you want feel, you get a wheel. If you want to go fast, you get pedals or something like that. Like it actually says it on the as you open the box. It's pretty funny. It's
Yeah,
true,
that
too.
definitely made me a faster driver when I went from my G27 up to the Club Sport V3s.
Yeah, and you could even use shoes with those and stuff. Yeah. Any other questions?
So you want to have the CLS Elite pedals, the LC ones? Is that correct?
Yeah, I would get the 3-pedal one myself.
The 3-pedal one. It's like
Yeah.
$230, correct?
Yeah, something like that. You could just go for the 2-pedal one, but as oh no, wait, no, you can't get the 2-pedal one with the load cell. So so like the cheapest one is 2 pedals, but it doesn't have a load cell. So as soon as you get the load cell, that's when you get the 3 pedals. So the what happens is they have the 2-pedal, and then it doesn't have a load cell, and then if you buy it with the 3 pedals, you get the load cell, and they just move the brake pedal that you would have gotten over to the left, and that becomes your clutch pedal. So
Oh, I see.
yeah.
I saw some
Very
people on Facebook saying they want to do this with the Audi.
Sure.
Is that something we could do maybe next week or something?
Sure. I mean, I'm down to do it whenever. If you guys wanted to do it tomorrow, I could. I mean, it's going to be really similar, but there is some little technique tips with the Audi that I could maybe talk about too.
I could help out with
Love
that
to
too.
actually go through that.
And yeah, someone else could do that too. Like one of the guys that's in the A, the A group for that. I think that would be a really good idea if you're at the front of the A group in the Audi. I mean, that'd be great.
I have no setup experience with Audi tuning, but I can help with lines and stuff like that.
There you go. Honestly, you look at the chassis notes here, like I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm not messing around with this stuff. Like I'm not smart enough. B, I'm not consistent enough. My opinion on setup changes are you have to be able to drop laps within a couple tenths of each other. You have to be able to drop 5 laps within a couple tenths of each other just to be able to start adjusting, unless there's a really big issue, adjusting the setup, because until you can do that kind of consistency in lap time, as soon as you start clicking around here, you don't know if you're actually making the difference or the car, if the setup is making the difference or you are making the difference. That's my opinion on setup. So I'm not smart enough, so I just download setups and then use those.
Richard, I gotta go now. Thank you so much for your help today, and I'll see
No
you
problem.
in the next days on
Absolutely.
the
And
server.
and the server's up for another while. Server's up for another 45 minutes if anyone wants to use it for practice.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you.
No problem.
Have a good one.
You too.
Rich, when are we gonna see you back in a real car?
Sorry?
When are we gonna see you back in a real car in Lucky Dog?
Hey man, as soon as someone wants me in their car and I have time and stuff. I just started my own business, so it's not a great time right now, but I hope to be busy soon, That's the problem.
I'll give you a seat in the TI later.
Hey man, I'll give you a TI for that ride in the TI. I gotta get rid of that thing. But yeah, I would love to drive the TI, man. That would be awesome. Love that.
Cool.
If you ever guys ever need another driver, if I can make it work, I'll do my best.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, man.
I'll let you at least take a spin in the MR2. I don't know if they'll let you race it though.
Valid. I like that. That's a good idea.
It does like to spin a little bit, but
I've heard they're great though.
mine's actually pretty easy to drive.